Hey, all right. Good evening, everyone. I am Daylon. I'm the founder of CuriousCore, and welcome to our monthly webinar, Working in UX Design. And this month we have a ex-colleague of mine, Ajmal, who's here on our show. So whether you're listening to our podcast or watching our webinar, we welcome you very much to the show. And please allow me to give a brief introduction about Ajmal before we continue. So Ajmal is actually a Malaysian, and he's a design executive living in Singapore. He's currently the lead product designer at Grab, and he shares a vast work experience of more than 8 years in the digital design industry as a product designer. And he previously started his career as a digital marketer and front-end developer for different startups in Kuala Lumpur before he actually came to Singapore to pursue a career where I actually met him as a fellow colleague at Aviva, which is an insurance company. And so Ajmal is really knowledgeable, like he about code, and he started as a front-end developer and designer. And so that's hence the title of our talk, From Code to Canvas, where he gradually eyewitnesses sort of like transformation from code to design. And I think over the last couple of years at Grab, he has grown a lot as well. So I'm very eager to catch up with him this evening to learn a little bit more about his work at Grab, his working experience in Singapore so far as a Malaysian expatriate. And also, he mentioned something about behavioral design. So I think that's a very interesting field that I think some of you might be keen to listen more about. So if you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat below, and I'll be happy to field some questions to Ajmal later. But welcome to the show, everyone. This is Daylon, and I'm the founder of CuriousCore. We help mid-career professionals to transition into the field of user experience design and product management. And welcome to the show. So Ajmal, thank you so much for joining us this evening. How's it going today?
Hey, Dylan. First, thank you for the very kind words and comprehensive introduction. I think I just told you earlier when we just started. It's been a long day today. Just come back from work, but yeah, I'm excited to be here and honored to join you.
Well, thank you so much for spending time to give back to the community. And we have in our audience some of my students as well. So that some of them are based in Singapore, and we, of course, have our usual audience around the region. So there's quite an interesting audience setup right here. And maybe let's just start off with like the nature of your work, like what, since you were speaking about it, what are you busy with these days at Grab?
Good question. So when I joined Grab, I joined a team called, at that time it's called economics team, and they changed the name to marketplace. But it's not like this, carousel like marketplace, right? So it's just supply and demand, right? So it's a marketplace. And then in January 2020, I joined design system team. So what I'm busy with this day is, first, I guess dealing with design system, products and processes, those are the stuff. I guess at my level as lead as well, doing what I have to do at my role, like interviewing, all this kind of stuff, help with the interview as a panel and stuff like that. Yeah.
So it sounds like you have responsibilities to hire new people, and it sounds like you're still busy working on design systems. Can, just for the benefit of those people who are not aware what a design system is, in your own words, how would you explain that to a layman? Yeah.
Oh, yeah. So that's a very good question, Dylan. I guess this changes every day depending on depending on what I eat. I guess every day it depends. Today I would describe it as design system is I think I mentioned briefly earlier, right? So it's, to me, if I had to distill it, is this three P's, right? The people, processes and product, right? So if you choose, let's say with product first, so what is the product of design system? You can say it's a documentation website, it's a code libraries, is design UI kits and stuff like this, right? So something that a consumer, let's say a designer and engineer can consume, right? That's a product. Then processes is like, let's say I want to add a new component, or I have a question, how do I use these components? And you must have a process, right? Like, do I message you at Slack, or do I schedule a call, right? So you have to create those processes, right? I mean, I'm just generalizing here, right? And lastly is people, right? So it's all about people. So if you create a robust system but nobody use it, is it a good system, right? So you have to think about adoption, right? So when you think about adoption, from my sort of like perspective, is about campaigning, I call it, right? Or marketing. So you have to market your product, right? So that people are aware and people will use it and understand it, and even collaborate, right? And contribute to it. Yeah. So that's
Well,
my
Well, thank you for explaining that. I mean, it's nice to see you working on it because I remember working on a similar project while we were working together. And I still remember you explaining to me like the BEM like framework. I was like, oh, like Ajmal taught me this, like this programming framework from being a developer. You wanna help like people understand that? I mean, I thought it was very useful because like yeah, and I actually when later subsequently when I started working, I was like talking to the developer, like, do you guys use BM?
Right. I think we can skip those. So I guess like I don't know if like best practices, if that is the latest one, but yeah. So BM, what does it stand for, Dylan? Something modifier. I forget what it was. Yeah.
No, it's
I mean,
okay.
at the time, to be fair to us, that time that was
Yeah.
like the thing,
The
right?
best practice.
The
Yeah.
best practices. Yeah, but I think that
What is
now.
the best practice these days in design systems? Like, or is there one?
Oh,
Or you
are
guys
we
are
going? I don't think we have time for. I don't know if we have time to cover design system. Is a deep topic. Yeah, I guess there's no right or wrong. I would start with that, right? I think as fellow designer would say, it depends, right? So it depends on the size, the team depends on the outcome, I would say as well, right? So if maybe it's okay to use the outdated or not outdated, like a bit dated or
Hmm.
proven proven
Hmm.
framework like BM. So I
Yeah.
think it really depends, right? So there's no such thing like, oh, this is the only way or the best practices. So I think the
Okay.
best practices is the best practices to your team, as long as I think it reaches your goals, right? Like you become productive with it and stuff like that. I think
Yeah.
then good system for you. Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense. I think when you were sharing the BEM framework, which I just Google search it, it's block, element, and modifier.
Right.
It was like sort of like a coding best practice or something like that.
CSS, yeah, CSS naming, yeah.
Yeah. So that's, I mean, just in general, it's always good to have good code hygiene and things like that. So that's something I learned from you. I remember that. Yeah, so I think another thing that you wanted to talk a little bit more about is behavioral design. I'm curious, like, how is that related to design system work that you're doing, like all this behavioral design stuff?
Oh, good question. You throwing me all this heavy
Okay,
heavy.
maybe let's just start with like a very simple question, like, what is behavioral design, right? In your own words, yeah.
Right. So I think I'm a bit hesitant. So maybe I give you a bit context, right? So I think I come from a place of privilege. When I joined I think I mentioned earlier, right? I joined economics team. So this economics team, I mean, we function like the full end-to-end department, right? Where we have PMs, we have designers, we have analytics and everyone, right? And then in marketplace team or in economics team, we have a behavioral scientist when I joined, right? We hire like 2 or 3 behavioral scientists. So obviously when we do our features or product, we have their input and their sort of like strategy even, right? They come up with like behavioral economics actually, right? So because they are behavioral scientists, so it's more around behavioral economics. So I'm just there to learn and absorb, I would say, right? So what I'm saying is like compared to them, like some of them are like even have master, have PhD and all this kind of stuff. So I wouldn't call myself a behavioral designer, right? But what I get to, like I say, as a privilege, I get to work with them and see how, you know, with behavioral economics and design, how do we, you know, sort of like find a synergy, right? When I do, let's say, a workshop for ideation, right? So instead of like maybe the common ones, now I get another fresh perspective from behavioral economics, right? So you're looking at things like priming, nudging, you know, all this choice architecture. You know, there's a lot of like depth and
Yeah.
right. So depending on the project, I get to. So I always joke that I'm like an intern for the behavioral scientist team, right? So I'm just there to learn from them, and after years and years of doing it, now I'm sort of like trying to build a self-serve tool internally within Grab, right? Where yeah, I'm sort of like become the go-to person if you wanna discuss or learn more about behavioral science, right?
Wow. So am I right to say that after sort of observing how your behavioral scientists work at Grab, you've sort of synthesized many of those learnings into like a tool that anyone in the company can use it and choose to apply it in their designs? Is that
Right. Yeah. So I would say we co-create and co-author the tools together, right? So together we get together. We also close outside work, so we just yeah come up with the initiative. It's almost like a bottoms up initiative. So like we both of us. Because I think one thing that we realize as well, if let's say we have this passion and have this concern or dimension, if you want to call it that, um, but not everyone might be interested in that, right? Let's say we trying to do something in 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 the design process, let's say, right? But then, or not everyone think, oh, I should include, you know, this behavioral design or behavioral science perspective, right? So how do we? And there are teams who are interested, but then there's only two of us. I cannot attend all the meetings, right? So one again being a lead, I guess one of the challenge I set myself is how do I scale myself, right? So one way is to create a tools where at least if it's like surface level, they can use the tool. But if they need more in-depth guidance or consultation, then we can have a sort of like a call or meetings.
Yeah, that's really smart. I think this is the same problem with data, right? Like helping people become more data aware, and the data scientists can be like everywhere. So it's kind of like a system is needed or tool is needed to help support that initial engagement or to help them to be a little bit more self-serve, right? In terms of learning it. I want to maybe contextualize an example. I don't know if it's commercially sensitive to share, but maybe can you share with me an example of a nudge that Grab uses, or what do you think is something that you can share that's a behavioral design
Right.
example?
Right. So maybe I can reframe your question. So you're right, right? So maybe I
Yeah,
can
maybe you
be.
can share Grab, but maybe you can share a behavioral
Yeah.
design example from another.
Right, right. So some of the thing that comes onto our mind that let's say maybe everyone here watch Netflix, right? So when you watch Netflix, you notice there's this is it chime? Is that the way to pronounce it? There's this thing where right, right. So it's to prime. So maybe you know it was not an intentional thing, but the moment we listen to that, you know, trigger, it almost like put us in this like relaxed mode, right? Oh, I'm watching this thing, right? So that is priming, right? And then and things like what else I can think on top? Like let's say you want to take some let's create some crazy example, right? Let's say today if I open Google Map, right? And then I want to go somewhere. Concept of nudging is like, so let's say instead of I'm looking at this MRT, there's bus and stuff, right? So a digital nudge would be like something that maybe if today if you see the Google Map, it's very neutral, right? Like it's like showing you as a user what you choose. But maybe a good nudge, maybe if MRT is so busy, right? Maybe it's best to actually consider a bus, right? So by showing those signal on the map, like, through, you can use this. Now we're talking about the overlap with design, right? You can signal with green color dot or gray color dot, right? So then now this interface is telling me or signaling to me, if I go to the MRT, it'll be very busy, right? If I go to the bus, it's a bit more, spacious and stuff like that. So then there's a good nudge, right? Then I will go to the bus instead of, yeah. So those are some of the made up on top of my head.
Yeah,
So maybe
I think those are really good examples. They are excellent. I think it's all around us. It's a matter of actually whether we notice it or not. Like an example would be, as I remember, like using confirmation bias, or so like having, like, instead of getting people to say yes to a newsletter subscription, sometimes the company just like selects yes for you. So it's actually a lot harder for you to say no, because it's an extra step, right? And actually that,
I like that you mentioned that, but then there's a borderline of dark pattern, right? So
yeah, that's
now you're
definitely
making decision for me, right? Yeah. So actually, let's discuss this. So I think that's a good point, right? So I think, again, at least in my work at Grab, part of the dimension that we try to cover is to have this thing called ethical audit as well as part of behavior. So there's this spectrum of like, I think a recent example of, like, let's say Robinhood, I think had this issue where this young kid, because there's no limit to it, gamification, right? And then all of a sudden this kid owe a lot of money, and then he or she, I forgot, right?
So for the audience benefit, Robinhood is like a stock trading app which has gamification elements, which means every single transaction or every single trade you do, they celebrate it with like confetti, like being thrown around. So it really makes you feel good as a user that, hey, like you did like a really awesome job, like investing, and someone committed suicide because the person thought he owed like $1 million or something, like several years ago. So that's what Ajmal is talking about over here for ethical design. When you say ethical design audit, like who does it? Like who is it like a policing thing, or like is it like voluntary?
Yeah, so I think that's why I say I co-author, right? So there's certain things where I think that's why I say I'm hesitant, right, to call it behavior design, because I think so if I were to describe it myself, right, there's this another sort of like perspective where I call it like macro and micro, right? So at macro level, that's where the behavior scientists sort of like, let's say, this audit, right, where it's going to audit a lot of features, let's say, that we built. So she decide, right, because she has all the qualification and experience on deciding what goes into the audit, right? But I think my part is more around, let's say, when we try to ideate, I'm trying to find a very generic example here. Let's say profile, like LinkedIn have this complete your profile thing, right? So that is usually when people think about that, they think about progress bar, that's it, right? Then we designer usually, or not usually, like sometimes, depending on your exposure, right? Then you think, I just have to apply the right, hierarchy, right colors, so that the progress bar looks. But I think at micro level, if you understand game mechanic, you can apply different game mechanic so it goes back to the system, right? So do you want to reward good behavior, or do you want to punish bad behavior, right? So then you start to look at choice architecture, and then choose the right game mechanic, and then that goes as an idea. So at micro level, I think for designer to have some exposure, it's very helpful, because now your idea is less, or I would say your idea is more creative compared to a typical typical ones.
Yeah. Just so I'm not sure if I'm guessing the definition over here. Is choice architecture like you're designing the conditions for users to choose a certain option? Is that right? Okay, so that's the definition.
Mandatory, right? Yeah.
Okay. And you know what's isn't there like an ethical dilemma over that? Like,
yes. That's why when you said just now, when you make decision for the user, right? I think Uber also has this issue last time when, again, if you try to gamify your app, and then when, let's say you're a driver and then you're tired, right? And then you've been driving for 12 hours, and then, oh, just one more thing, if I do for the, and then that will compromise your health and safety, right?
Yeah.
So one of the, I guess, generic rule is to give a choice, right?
So it's like not to force that option, but actually to give it a choice, even though one choice is preferred over others. And of course, as designers, we can always highlight the choice that is more preferred. For example, like making the button green or orange or something like that.
Right. Yes. So you use hierarchy to sort of like, contrast, what is the choice architecture, right? Like left or right, blue or red, right?
Exactly.
But I
Exactly.
guess make it explicit in the sense where it's not like, oh, it's just red and then you hide the blue ones, right? You can actually get the blue one, but you must click 3 times and, like do
Oh yeah.
all sort of magic, right? So I guess that's the thing, right? It's
Mm,
tricky, and it's also, yeah, who design on all of these things, right? So it's very interesting, like I say, dimension
yeah.
to be able to have an opportunity to work on these things, right?
So I'm gonna zoom out and ask about like your entire design career. Okay. So
Sure.
just focus on Grab. Have you ever got in this situation where you have an ethical dilemma as a designer before?
Yes, I think I just mentioned right earlier where,
Okay.
yeah, but
And
like you say, right? It's
yeah,
not at Grab, right? It's just when I
yeah,
zoom
in
out
general. So
across, right?
what did you do? What did you do to manage that? Like did you manage to resolve it, or what did you do as a designer to manage it?
I think what comes to mind. So as you were asking me that question, I remember with one of our escalate, Rebecca, right? So I think I find myself like when I don't know what to do or there's no outlet to this, you know. Sometimes I feel like, I quit. I quit. I just move on, right? Find other place where I
So
feel
you done
comfortable,
it.
right?
You actually quit a job because of facing that ethical dilemma before.
Maybe I'm exaggerating, but yes. So I changed a job a lot. So Grab is my 10th company, I
Yeah.
would say. So I changed a lot. I moved to startups. So when there's thing that I feel, so I will not say this because of ethical. Maybe I reframe it. So when I find myself in a place that I'm compromising, right? Either it's a user experience or, something about this, like what you
The
mentioned, then
values, your own
the
value.
values, right? So I would rather find opportunity somewhere else rather than, feeling, um or giving excuses to the, you
Yeah,
know
to actually do what they say and suggest. I think that's very brave of you because I'm not sure if everyone will actually do that because I mean it's a job anyway, and especially if it's a well-paying job, right? So if you don't,
the,
yeah,
right, it's a brave and it's a privilege, right? So I think
yeah,
I acknowledge it's a privilege. So I don't expect, at least for myself, I just expect my, like, can I leave it with myself, right? So I think
yeah,
I
yeah, I think that's
energize someone else if they decide whatever. I think that's up to them. But I think, for at least for me, I could find another job, maybe less paying, doesn't matter, right? So
I,
yeah.
well, it's actually I think the practice is it's very gray and it's a lot more rampant than we think. And there's always a saying, right? If I don't do it, some other designer will, right?
Ah,
So yeah, like I don't know, like I guess for
right.
you, just like yeah, I quit.
I
Or
so here's the thing, right? So I think I like that you bring this up. So I guess, again, I think I've gone through this, a lot of these processes, and sometimes I quit not because of, something is wrong with the company. Maybe it's something wrong with me, right? Like I don't have patience and stuff like this. I think it's about mindset, right? So I think I've over the years, I grew to learn that, try to influence, um the world that be the change, right? Basically. So if
yes,
I feel like, oh, this is outside my control now, rather than like complaining about it and stuff, like, how do I turn that into an opportunity, right? Let's be a designer here. How might we, solve this stuff, right? So that's why you see that nowadays is more about like, oh, people, let's say, maybe not on top of their mind thinking about something, blah, blah, blah. Then, oh, let's create a tool, let's create an initiative so that, there's less excuses for, oh, I'm not sure, I don't understand, I don't have time. Then when you have those tools, then it makes it easier for them to use it, right? To
Yeah.
understand it. So
I really like that. I think I've always known you to be a builder. So that's really nice that you bring that touch. But what I'm also hearing you say is that it's not about like rage quit the company.
yeah.
It's more like
Yeah.
actually these days is like, hey, like are they actually suggesting this intentionally or unintentionally, right? If they're unintentional, can I like educate them about good ethical design practices? Or can I create a tool like what you said to
Yeah,
help?
and to be fair as well, it's not like it comes from a place where I think I know better. It's when I say opportunity, then if let's say the tool is wrong or something, then it creates this space and my again mindset of like of oh I think I read this somewhere where the best way to get the right answer online is to post up the wrong one, right? So if you go to forum, you post out the wrong answer, someone, keyboard warrior is gonna go and correct you, right? But that's to me, that's how I see it, right? So meaning the best way is to put up an initiative. So maybe you are wrong, but that's fine because now the focus is less about you will listen to the outcome, right? So the excuses is less about I don't know, I don't. The excuses say, Ajmal, you are wrong. Then correct me, then right. Then what you end up having is having this tool where people without even realize already adopting and use the tool, but now we're just discussing the details of should I use this audit that you created or should I build on top of it, right? So now you change the conversation and the topic of discussion already. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Let's go somewhere lighter. So like I don't know, bombard you with too many technical questions. How has it been working in the Singapore tech scene so far? Because you've been here for several years now.
Hmm. Um, how has it been? I think it's been a great journey. I think.
Yeah, like you joined Grab way before the IPO. I mean, that was many years ago. And I think you just rose up through the ranks as well. So yeah, what are you observing? Like, is there anything that you're seeing in the tech scene, or at least like how Grab is working that you think is very worthy to learn, or that we as other
Yeah.
businesses should know? Yeah.
Right. Right. I think I would not again, right. I think not gonna speak specifically for Grab, but I guess being at company like Grab, which is the size and the problem space that it solves and stuff like this. I guess if I want to tie back to the role again as designer, I think the role evolved as well. Like I think when I joined, I think my role was called UX design, and I think there's a lot more um, UX is expected out of me. Let's say when I joined, I think back then it was like when we do the usability testing, we have a full support of a UX, researcher. But then over years, over the time, then it is expected out of product design. So they changed like the naming of the role, right? So now I have to moderate my if it's in my language, right, or if it's in English, if it's based in Singapore. So I moderate. I have to write the script. I have to. So the role also I would say evolve, and it's a good thing, right? So I think it's sort of like get you to
You get ownership. Yeah.
ownership and work across the spectrum rather than very small specialization. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really good. And I think I'm curious, like, I know you may not have been in the Malaysia tech scene for a while, but I'm just curious, like, how would you sort of like compare things? Because I'm looking at a lot of startups like in Singapore actually getting like unicorn status, right? There are some startups in Malaysia that are unicorn status, like Cosm, for example, but they're like lesser. So just wondering, like, do you see any difference working in Malaysia versus working in Singapore tech? Yeah.
Ah, this is a good question. I never thought about it. So it's a bit. I think. I think. I don't know how to answer this in terms of like, you know, contrast it Malaysia. I mean, even if I do, I think it's personal perspective. I think what sort of like pulled me into like Singapore tech scene is I used to come for a conference, CSS conference actually. So it's this front end conference, which really happened in Singapore. So every time I visit Singapore for, you know, for all of these learnings, I always find that yeah, it resonate with me, right? I mean, as you mentioned, like everything that, you know, all the kind words that you share with me, I learn all of them in Malaysia, right? So it's not like trying to say one is better than the other, right? So I think it's just a matter of you know, what resonate better at that point of time. Then I feel like, oh, if I want to, you know, pursue and having you know, a career that I find meaningful, you know, and I want to have that level of craft, I think the opportunity back then was like, yeah, this like support group. So pre-COVID, there's like this after work event, you know. So even so, when I attend all of these in Singapore, I can feel sort of like, oh, these resonate with me better, and that's why I choose to find opportunity in Singapore. Yeah.
Yeah, and we're very happy to have you here,
Thank
building
you.
the future of Grab, which is one of our unicorns. I mean, obviously, Grab actually started in Malaysia first,
Okay.
with their headquarters before they actually decide to relocate to
Right.
Singapore. But yeah, we're really glad that they have groomed so much talent over the years. And we have a question from the audience, and
Mm.
Debbie's asking, as I understand, most people transition to UX design may not have much experience to make a career move. So what kind of mindset and ability should these career transitioners have? Especially during the interview process, they might be asked about unethical design, right?
Oh, sorry. So just to read it again, right? I think is it the question? Is it about what kind of mindset and ability we should have?
Yeah, I guess it seems, yeah, it sounds like what's the dilemma, like how do I solve this dilemma if I'm new, I'm trying to do my interview, I'm trying to get into the industry, but maybe in that company they're like, maybe they're practicing a little bit of like unethical design
I
or
see, I see, I see. Yeah, okay. This is a very good question. So I like this kind of question. So I would do this, right? For me, the way I try to navigate, you know, this kind of situation is usually if we don't care about ego or care about credits, if we again choice architecture, right? If you try to create a workshop where you sort of like present, you know, this is the ethical way, and then if that idea that you want the outcome to be comes from the people who you collaborate with, right, or co-create with. Let's imagine like me and you, right? So let's say you being hard on me, like blah blah. But if somehow we create a workshop where you come up with the idea, like you feel like you contributed to this, right? Then to me, then it's easier to serve the outcome, because sometimes it's actually, you know, when it's confrontational. Let's say the way I do it is like I want to be like this Mr. Know-it-all person, and then I try to, oh, what you doing, Daylon, is unethical. So when the dynamic of working, right? That's why I say I like the question. It's about mindset, right? So if the mindset is more about focus on the outcome rather than the output, which is like, oh, our experience here should not have automatic check. And so sometimes I guess when we as designer, right, we attention to detail, we get hung up on these things. We tend to forget about the outcome. So I think again, focus on the outcome and focus on create environment and create a place where it feels like everyone is contributed to this idea. And then I think you, at least from my experience, you get much easier, you know, collaboration, less friction, right? Because like now, all of a sudden, this genius ethical idea is like Daylon's idea, right? Although like you've been the one who like actually noticing it, observing it, and Daylon will figure. So it's a win-win, right? Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I'm getting you correctly, but correct me if I'm wrong.
Sure,
But what
sure.
I'm hearing you say is that uh, we shouldn't claim moral superiority over the other person, right? We shouldn't judge the other person. Hey, like you're practicing unethical design. This is bad. Like I disagree with you. But
Yeah, if you
what
start
you're,
there, it's gonna be a very hard,
yes,
hard.
what I hear you suggesting is actually, hey, let's do a workshop together. Let's find a solution where we can actually do this design where it's actually ethical. And then you hint to them and you try and shape that process where you try and influence them to more ethical practices, and hopefully they get it, and maybe they also feel like they're invested in it. Is that what you were saying?
Yeah, right. Exactly that, right? Yeah. So
I think that's a very smart move, and actually that's really how we should work with other people as designers, like to be like collaborative. And it doesn't really matter whether it's your idea or my idea, right? Or who is wrong, or you are right or I'm
right,
wrong.
right.
Um,
So
yeah,
sorry to interrupt. So I think what I think I like also, having some experience working in behavioral science or design is you can actually use it for, we call it like a meta thing, right? So for example, like what I just described to you is called a rock star effect, right? If I make you a rock star, right, like what your idea is, then you will figure about it, and then like you end up choosing. Let's say you are the decision maker, right, in these things. So if you apply rock star effect, right, methodology, which is make you feel like rather than I'm being this person, like you say, right, giving you all of this ethical, and now all of a sudden there's this connotation that you're a bad person, you're unethical. So you can sort of apply these things to your daily, to your
I
daily
love
life.
that. I love that you're using it in stakeholder management. This is like wonderful.
Exactly. Yes.
That's really awesome. Yeah, I didn't know there was a term for it, but yeah, that's the rockstar effect for all of you listening in. Hope we answered your question. And yeah, let's talk a little bit about your transition process, because I know you were first a web developer, and then after that you joined the design team at Aviva, where I met you. So and then you went fully into design, because I remember when you joined you were doing a bit of code, or yeah, right, you were still
Right.
like coding for us a little bit.
Right. I
Yeah,
guess not like production code, but at least like
yeah,
some MVP code, right? With
yeah,
our
exactly.
colleague, right, John? Yeah, ex-colleague John. Yeah. So I guess the question was, how do I translate, or like when?
Yeah,
So
like can you describe that transition process when you went from code to like design, and then like fully on like design? Because I think if I remember correctly, a lot of what you learn is like self-taught and just like you practicing.
right.
Yeah,
Yeah. So I think the role, like if you look at the naming of the role, probably you see Aviva is the place where I make that transition. But actually, in my last company I work with in Malaysia, in Kuala Lumpur, Kau team, there is where the role is called front end dev. But I also volunteer to help out the design part. So that I think back then we don't have Figma, we use Sketch and stuff. So I would say that's how I would describe it, right? Like if you see an opportunity and you want it, back then I'll just I see the opportunity that the design could use some help, and I would do it, right? I would say I will absorb this responsibility and start. I mean, my design was very bad back then, and I don't know a lot of things, right? But that's how you learn, like on the job, I would say. And then I actually work for a small startup, yeah, based in Block 71 for 2 months before I joined Aviva. So I was also a designer there. Maybe I should not name this company, but yeah. So I was working for them for 2 months, and then I joined Aviva after that. Yeah.
yeah. And I remember you feeling a little maybe out of the water when you were first like picking up design. So how did you manage? How do you make that process easier on yourself, like during the transition process, right? So yeah, let's start with that.
Bad news is not gonna get easier now. I'm just kidding. I think I will not say easier, right? So um I think for me at least is a mindset shift, right? So I think you also mentioned it in the introduction again, right? I actually started as digital marketer. So I think it's about if you have that fear, or like, oh, this is outside my comfort zone. I think the more you spend time there, the less what's the right word here? It's like the less sensitive you feel on the fear itself, right? Like, oh, I mean, obviously I've gone through all of the experience with, imposter syndrome all the time, right? But I think once you be there almost all the time, then you feel like I just have to, again, shift the mindset of like learning. I think I also mentioned that that's how I at least I navigate, right? Like I learn it, and then the best way to learn is by doing it, right? And then by doing it, and if you can do it and you cannot, when you share with others and others don't get what you mean, maybe you need more practice. Then if you can sort of like make people understand about what you do and what is your intention, then I think that's how you at least have some competency level on the craft that you're trying to master, right?
Mm. Yeah, I think that is so true. So you just kind of grind it out and just try and
I mean, there's support system. So sorry to cut you off, but I think fellow designers, I think I always go back to mindset and behavior. So I think being humble enough to when you don't know things, right? It's okay to just, I don't know how to do this, right? So there's a lot of like, I mean, if you want to see like in terms of like, let's say what you can do in terms of what's the right word here? Pillars or dimension again, right? Is that okay? Have your support system. So what is your support system? Is it online and offline, or blah 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 blah, right? So back then, I guess in Aviva there was there's designer, right? There's Rebecca. There's
yeah, there
all of
were a
them.
few people like
There's few people,
yeah.
right? So then we can learn from each other. That's one. And then like I mentioned the conference and the after office stuff. So there's a lot of support system that, but yeah. So I just make sure that I have all of these, and it address different things, right? For all of this support system.
Yeah, that's so true. I realized I learned quite a bit about product management at Aviva as well, just learning from our London colleagues who
Yeah.
were like a little bit more mature in the practice.
Right.
Uh,
Community as well, right? From the
yeah,
community. Yeah.
it's really wonderful. And these days, like designers have websites like ADP lists, right? So they can find a mentor,
Yeah.
they can get a mentor. Yeah, do you are you on that list, or are you mentoring people, or how are you, like
Yes. I didn't know you're gonna ask this, but somehow I was preparing for this. So if you go to my website and / pay dash it dash forward pay it forward, I actually have like a page so right dedicated for this. So I don't join ADP list, but I've been trying to give back. I like I tell you right earlier, right? I'm here because of my privilege. So I should pay it forward. And I mean I for me at least I contribute to my alumni sort of like network, right? So
yeah,
I just don't feel as comfortable like trying to um market, mentor, because like again there's imposter syndrome and all this kind of stuff. So
right.
personally I just
Are you
choose
are you personally like open to it?
right.
Yeah,
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, for sure.
great.
Yeah.
So you guys discovered Ajmal here first on CuriousCore. He's not on ADP list, so you can't find him there. But I'm sure, can they reach out to you on LinkedIn or something?
On my website. So if you go to my website, I actually say the best way to
Okay.
contact from my
I'm
website.
gonna
And
I'm gonna go hunt your website now, but yeah, okay. We'll make sure that people who are here as part of the live audience gets a link to your website, and um that's really great. And do you have any advice for people who are transitioning? Like you talk a lot about mindset. Yeah. So what kind of mindset should people have other than what you mentioned, right? Being open to learning from others. Yeah.
right, it's a good question. Advice. I really dislike to give advice because it usually is very, it works for me, but maybe it doesn't work for other people, right? But yeah, so I think if I were to maybe share my personal perspective how I go through about it, I think one thing I realized, I mean, I mentioned I acknowledge my privilege, but one thing I realized, the company, the org that you want to work with doesn't owe you anything, right? So think of it as like, even in the beginning, think of it as transactional, meaning I must contribute something in order for them to pay me as a designer, right? So I transition a lot, right? Digital marketer. So why would someone pay me a front end dev, compensation when I'm a digital marketer, right? So again, I was, oh, there's this opening and there's this opportunity, then maybe I'll do it, mm, I'll not say for free, but yeah, so you do it first, showcase, that you can contribute to it. And then I guess, when people can see that, oh, you actually, able to do it, then I think the conversation is much easier. And actually that's how I actually started as a front end dev. So if you actually know your way around Google full, right? If you can Google, I actually offer up to the world to build their website for free, right? So I think it's 3 to 5 websites for free. Again, it's a privilege I can survive to provide for free. I don't suggest, like, you should
Yeah,
do
not
it for free.
everyone can do it. Yeah.
Not everyone can do it. So I'm not saying that, but at least back then I could afford to do it. But that's what I did. So again, because like again, the mindset is less about, I learn it, I have this knowledge, then therefore you should pay me. So I think the mindset was, if I can contribute to something that bring value to you, I think you have no problem paying to me, right? So if you have that mindset, and at least for me, it works for me, right? I keep changing this, role, and then it works for me. Yeah.
I really like that. I mean, it's kind of like give first mindset, right? I'm willing to give what it takes first, and then I'll get what I want.
In a way, yeah.
Yeah. I love that. I mean, that's a very abundant mindset, because you feel like you have enough to give before you need to take something. So that's really wonderful. So since you're like mentoring people and you're helping people, what are some of the more common challenges that you see for people who are like trying to transition or to get into UX?
I think it's very unique, at least for the network that I'm in. So it's excuse me. Sometimes it's less about like this common or generic roadblock for them. I think so let's say some design is more extrovert, but then struggle with certain things. So it's very, case by case basis. Right? So for example, like maybe some of them have challenge in whiteboarding, let's say, right? So then what we do then, let's have a mock interview, right? So something like that. So I think it's very differ from. So I guess that's another thing, right? So I think by having that, like you say, right, mindset of abundance, and then you would realize and learn what is your strength, right? So maybe I have a strength in something, right? Like maybe if my background was digital marketing, then I know how to market myself, or I know how to code. So, but then I don't know how to do a usability test, because back then there's no bootcamp and stuff like that, right? So once you know where's your strength, then again, when you apply a job, maybe if there's a company that really looking for that role, and you have that strength, then that's where you can double down. It's almost like the Aviva job, right? If you remember, you mentioned yourself, right? You have to code, right? So, but it's not expected for designer to code. But my title back in Aviva was UX designer, right? So I see that, oh, see this, I'm a good fit for this role, right? So apply, right? So
Yeah. Yeah, I remember back then you were just like, or I don't know, consciously or unconsciously, like our manager was like stretching you, like, oh, Ajmal's not very used to doing research. Let's get Ajmal to do more research.
but thank God for that, right? So I guess
Yeah.
it become a good challenge, and good
Yeah,
experience.
so I think you were up for that challenge and you were open to it. And I think that also helps make you a more rounded designer. And by the time you left, like you were ready to like work at Grab and be like, I mean, you were, if I remember correctly, you were a full stack full stack developer.
No. I was front end. I don't know how to do back
You were
end.
just front end. Okay, got it. Okay, I misunderstood. But well, I could at least say like you're a full stack designer now, right?
No such thing.
Is
So
there no?
no such thing. There's no such thing. Yeah, there's so many dimensions, right? So I don't want to say layer. It's not layer, right? There's inclusive design, there's accessibility, there's interaction design. There's no such thing. I mean, maybe there is a unicorn.
There may be a unicorn somewhere.
But I'm not it. So I'm not it, basically. Yeah.
I mean, I'm looking at your skill set. Like you can code. You're interested in behavior design. You can do UX research. You can do UX design. Like no problem at all. Yeah, I don't know, man. Like you come very close to what I would imagine as as startups will want to hire like a unicorn, but
That's the keyword here. So what do you imagine? If you imagine a spectrum, I think I imagine like this kite, thing where
a
footballers
kite.
like passing, dribbling, like, so I think
Uh,
it's impossible for someone to have like, a very full, right? So
oh,
maybe
right. So like from all the way from one end to the other, like
yeah. So things like I don't have so much experience maybe in accessibility design, so that is a bit short.
mm,
Maybe it's not because like I'm bad at it. I just don't have opportunity to solve, or
yeah.
to explore those, right? So that's why I said it depends how do you define. Yeah.
Yeah, that's excellent that you point that out because like in UX, we're always working in a team and it's like the strength of the team
Right.
it's the
Exactly.
strength of the work in the end. So I think you make really good points because we help polish each other and make the work even better in this case.
Mm.
And I think someone was asking in the audience as well, like, what is the benefit of using a design system, right? As a designer, I think, and as a developer, right? Would you be able to answer that?
Yeah, I also trying to look at this question. Maybe I reframe a bit the question, right? So I think it might be tempted to think that or knowing this skill make you code faster. Maybe in some capacity or in some context, yes. But sometimes is the ability to, so to me at least I see it as a ability of having the clarity. So meaning sometimes you need to slow down actually, right? So it's not always about being fast. So I say let's use example of like people who do speed read, right? So people who do speed reading, it's not about like I can finish the book very fast, right? Because it's about you can read very fast, but when the times you want to absorb what you want, you actually slow down, right? So when it comes to that, it's actually about control. Right? You can control your speed, right? Yeah, so that's the generic answer to this, but I think the question is more, I think you were asking the
Yeah,
question more.
what is the benefit of using a design system as a developer or designer? Yeah.
Right. So I think it solves a lot of things, right? So you would have more cohesive and harmonious design, right? Meaning what that means is rather than, if it's, open book, then I can design whatever buttons I want, you can, and then imagine you have 100 of you, then which one do we, and I think also important to see from the lens of the customer, right? If the customer have, every time I change the services, right? Let's say I'm trying to order food or I try to book a ride, then every time I have to learn this, UI or learn this experience because of all of the different contexts, then there's a very high cognitive load, right? So by having, a harmonious and cohesive experience, which actually what design system is aimed, to do, that definitely help, not just help the customer but help you to build faster as well. So now we know, oh, it's almost like Lego block, right? So if you know, like, you have this Lego set and stuff, so if you have some, product or experience feature you want to create, then you know how to compose these building blocks in a way, right? But if you don't have Lego, let's say you give you a clay, then just uh, give me something, Dylan, right? Give me a ship, right? Can you build a ship? Then you do your own way and stuff. But if you give me a Lego, then almost
Yeah,
maybe
it's a lot easier to build from Lego blocks than to design
right.
from scratch, right? Or with
Exactly.
brain
It
trust.
helps with code as well, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a very good analogy. You know what? I was just checking out your website, and I want to point out like a few things. So I'm gonna share screen, which I usually
No.
don't do. But wow, like this is amazing. So for those of you who are listening to the podcast, Ajmal has actually been a podcast host before for an internal design podcast back in 2019 with fellow designer Ting Lang. So yeah, tell me about that experience, like, hosting like an internal design podcast. Like, is it still ongoing or what's happening? Yeah.
No, so as it says there, it's only 11 episode. Yeah, maybe we do season 2 or something. Yeah, I think again, for me, it's opportunity to learn how to like what we're doing here, right? So I think I have this fear of speaking in public and stuff, and like I use, maybe it's still now. I stutter a lot and a lot of fillers and stuff. So when I do this, co-hosting, then I get to listen back to my, so I think I would say there's multiple sort of like outcome and benefit of doing this, right? So again, we don't just interview design, we actually interview others. So I get to learn about other roles as well. So we interview TPM, UX researcher, so I use that as an opportunity. And I think my takeaway for this activity was, in the series we have this thing where, what did you learn this week? So I really like that question. So you'll be surprised when you ask people like, what did you learn this week? So we get
Wow.
a lot of answer. So it's just that I get to learn as well, right? Like, oh, I didn't know about this, I don't know about this, and
Yeah.
so yeah.
That's really awesome. I'm wondering, after you did this like personal project, like what has it helped your career in any way, or like did it make you more visible in the organization?
Not
Yeah,
really.
what's going on?
Not really, actually. I think it just helps me. So now I think I do presentation more, a lot as well. Yeah, it gives me
It
confidence.
was like practice for you to,
Yeah, so I think I mean, like I mentioned earlier, it means a lot of things to me. Like I get, and then I think I talk about being in lead level, right? So back then I was senior, and then like, how do I scale myself, right? So it's sometimes what I scale, so it's not just how do I scale my, like, oh, I want to be, clone myself. So sometimes it's about maybe design, as you see these teams of, engineer, analytics, and designer, we are all design partners, right? Maybe to make us collaborate better is to actually, share a perspective of engineer to your fellow design, right? So just by interviewing and giving context and, asking question, then we will, oh, I didn't know TPM do this, I didn't know, so that's
Hmm.
another way to. And then it's just one of the things where, maybe not a lot of people, maybe, or not everyone into podcast, right? So sometimes it's the format, like, this is one of it. Maybe some of it was like, if you scroll down, right, this is self-serving tools and stuff like that. So
Yeah.
it's just trying to come up with a lot of format that might reach to different kind of audience.
Yeah, it's just wonderful initiative. And I also noticed over here, which is why I wanted to share screen, that you were working with Pretty, uh, and you actually came up together some frameworks, which I think we mentioned it earlier, right? About how do you nudge responsibly. So these are ethical dilemmas, right? And what's the ethical framework back in 2019, and a gamification playbook. This is really interesting. Is this is the product in the form of a book, or what's happening?
Some of this is in like a format of a document, right? And the
Hmm,
playbook is in the format of a web sites. So it's like a
very
website
cool.
where you can land, and then there's a link to Slack, and then there's a embedded slides, and there's like a it's almost like these small tools where, if you go to e-commerce where you want to filter, or black colors, and size M and stuff like that. So we almost have like this laundry list of game mechanic. Then we have this, dimension that you can filter,
Yeah,
what is
that's
your
cool.
goal, what is, the user level. So we have all of this stuff. So it just to help with the ideation process.
Yeah, so for those of you who are interested to check out like the screen I was mentioning about, you can just type in ajmalafif.com. So it's AJMALAFIF.com. That's Ajmal's like personal site. This is like something you can go and check it out. And well, thanks for sharing that. I was just wondering, like it seems like you work on a lot of like side projects, or mini projects outside of your work scope and your responsibility. Would you encourage designers to do that, like in general?
Yes. So in general, I feel like, yeah, do whatever you feel, meaningful and productive to you. So I think we all of us have our own sort of like priorities in life, right? Maybe I don't necessarily think you have to do, but I think for me, it's just natural for me to. I feel excited like doing. So I have this setup. It's not because of the podcast. Actually, the podcast setup was very old, like very minimal setup. I'm doing this for like a private streaming. So that's one of the productivity hack that I do. So I do private streaming. So so it's just that I always find myself, there's a lot of books also in the background. So I think I just enjoy, applying knowledge that I absorb. So for example, like, gamification playbook, or I have to code a website. So I feel like if I know stuff, but if I don't really think about the outcomes or bringing value with the knowledge, I feel like I'm just like this useless library where I have all the knowledge, but I'm not, giving value to others. So I think it's just more an outlet to apply what I learn, and yeah, and maybe I have some kind of fixation on trying to have this mastery of, there's
Yeah.
this thing that I'm trying to bridge between design and code. Yeah, and try to have more
Yeah,
depth in that. Yeah.
that's really good. I remember, I think this was years ago we talked about it, and I think you showed me this. I think it was you who showed me this website where people were just like building like mini products and they were making money out of it. Well, it was you, right?
Maybe, yeah, maybe it was me.
Yes. I forgot. I don't know what's the name of the site. It's like hackers or something like that.
Indie hacker. Oh yeah, indie
Yeah,
hacker.
indie hackers or something like that. Like, you know how so that's why I always remember you as like a builder, right? So like, are you also like thinking of like doing something like that in future? Because I know our manager went on to do that, and he's
Right,
built a
right,
business
right.
around it. Yeah.
Right. I guess at the moment, I think one thing I realized after jumping a lot of, sort of like roles, if it becomes your full-time job, is no longer enjoyable. So I think, at least for me, I find like, some of the hobby that I have a few hobbies, but being able to code without, having the stress of deadline and like bug fixing, all this kind of stuff,
Yeah, that's
it's
right.
great, right? But who knows, right? So who knows? Maybe, yeah, maybe if in the right time and chapter of my life, maybe having um that independence and stuff, maybe that will help, then maybe I would consider it. But I think for now it's more around yeah, having. And I think one thing I realized that keep driving me, that I don't necessarily feel like I should, oh, I learned this, so I must retrofit this to my work. But it just feels good when, when the time is right, then, oh, actually I know some of this stuff. Let's say like the engineer saying, oh, we are using React, blah 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 blah, because like you have sort of explored those stuff, then you're like, oh, I can sort of understand what you're talking about, right? So it's really sometimes helps with your work. So yeah, that's just a, I guess, a bonus. But
It's like you're tinkering.
yes,
And yeah,
tinkering.
like I think like a fun fact for everyone who like which I find, which is what fascinates me about Ajmal, is that Ajmal actually has a degree in actuarial science, in case you don't know what that means. Like insurers use actuarial science to determine like the amount of premiums they should charge someone. So it's you have to study economic principles for that. Someone actually asked how do you spell that. So I
No, there's
think
no. I'll spell
that's the
it for
wrong
you.
spelling. I totally forgot how to spell it. Yeah, like you mentioned some of your hobbies. Like tell us like one hobby that people don't. Okay, so Ashwell obviously studied it.
Um,
Yeah, what's one hobby
I
that
mean, I
not
have few. I mean, I lost touch with some of it. Used to play futsal and stuff like this. Play video games. And right now I'm learning Japanese. Yeah,
okay?
language. So that's my hobby now.
Language to learn.
I'm right now learning how to read time in Japanese. So yeah, so that's what I'm doing now.
Okay, interesting. So I'm gonna use a question that you used to ask your podcast guests. What did you learn this week?
Nice. What do I learn this week? I have a diary. Should I open up my diary? What did I learn this week?
Off the top of your head, man.
No. So I don't. So that's how I navigate life. I write notes. I don't. I think I save my brain power for processing and
Oh,
problems,
that's
not
such
for
a great idea.
memorization. But it's bad for my Japanese learning. I should learn how to memorize. No, I have it. I have it here. So let me. I just wrote it like a few hours ago.
Okay, that's great. Love
Right. So
reflection.
I think. I think. So what I wrote down here is what I learned. If This is very specific. So if ever in your design you talk about persona, right? Maybe it's good to share a percentage of how many segment of your user resonate with the persona. Because sometimes if you talk about this persona stuff, depends on school of thought. Some people think this is outdated, right? Because like, oh, your user is blah 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 blah. So many from so to generalize it to 3 or 4, is probably overgeneralizing, right? Like it's not accessible, all this kind of stuff. But I think if there is a need and time to um, share a persona, but just by mentioning, oh, by the way, this account for 60% of our user because our product is crypto or something like that, then all of a sudden, it carries more weight to the I'm sorry, it's very specific, but this is my last note. So
It's actually a
this is what I
very
learned this week.
yeah, this is like actually a very interesting note. Because I think that personas got so much flack for being inaccurate, and people were criticizing it, and like some people say, hey, you don't have to use it for every project. Every bootcamp teach you to create a persona, right? So like how useful it is it has been always up for debate, and I think this is a really a good point. If I understand you correctly, do you mean that after you created the persona, do you go back to the people you interviewed and ask them like, does this relate to you? Or do you mean like you circulate that persona around your current or prospective customers and ask them like, hey, do you resonate with this? Which one do you mean?
Interesting. I think there's no right answer to this because I also just learned it this week. I think for me, I see it differently. I think I see it like if you're looking at a bunch of data, right? Like, oh, there's this trend of like people come this experience 3 times, 4 times because of whatever reason, right? So then if then I think it's okay to like because of you seeing by the sort of like data, right? So then to give this to humanize this sort of like um, insight or this information that you're trying to digest, right? It's okay to, uh, then I guess, okay, this is a persona of, like say, if let's say, especially if your industry is very, very focused and it's very, let's say, crypto or Web3 or whatever, right? So then the way I see it is that rather than just interviewing, let's say, 1 or 2 of the user that you pick or test, maybe that does not represent, maybe that persona represent less than 1%. So
Hmm.
so that's why I say like if you create a persona and then there's some user segment that you can tie to it, I think it feels like you are humanizing the segment of the user, right? Like
Yeah.
maybe it's early adopters and the laggers, or I don't know what it is. So that's at least to me, I learned that
It's kind of like
it's
testing the
helpful.
persona, right? It's kind of like actually sense checking it. Yeah.
Correct. So it giving me as at least from the receiving end, give me confidence to
Yeah.
rather than sometimes when you look at it, then you like questioning yourself. I
Is
thought
this like a real
persona is
person?
is
Yeah.
outdated. Then you question yourself, you question the data or the persona. So then just by seeing the numbers, I feel like, oh, I have confidence. Someone asked us some
Yeah,
question here.
that makes a lot of sense. I mean, because one thing I teach my students is like a good persona is whereby when you show it to someone who's either in the same segment or related to that segment around the same age group, they're gonna say, "Hey, this reminds me of someone I know," right? So
Right.
like when people actually say that, like you've done a good job writing the persona because it's detailed enough, but also you've done a good job like highlighting some of the things and attributes of the person. So that's something I tell my students as well. So yeah, it makes a lot of sense to me. um, just as a passing note, I was wondering, do you have any advice for your juniors here today, like people who are listening? Most people who are mostly listening to our podcast are quite new to the field of UX design. Like what advice would you give to like your much younger UX design self?
Mm, it's a very good question. I think you asked this question, but yeah, I think I'll try to answer anyway. I think I keep goes to mindset, right? I think the mindset of always learning, and it's like a lifelong sort of like journey, right? Like I mentioned to you earlier, like design is so broad, right? It can be, and then um I would say learn about yourself as well. So meaning, if you know that this, like for example, like again coming from digital marketing and all this stuff. So when I found that I actually enjoy being a designer, I stick to it, right? Instead of, oh, now it's not design, I know I want to try something else. So just by knowing myself better, I feel like, okay, design is where I can contribute meaningfully on the strategy and influence the roadmap, because yeah, so that is where I feel in product life cycle, at least, that I find myself enjoying the process, right? Championing the user, right? Is and then, like, if you know how to code, then you can also contribute a bit about the solution or the product that you want to build. So rather than, let's say, the opposite, I am a developer who can design, then sometimes it's a bit, sometimes the setup of where you work maybe does not necessarily help you to, maybe to me it's still helpful to be a multi-dimensional sort of like professional, but I still think at least what I enjoy is to be a designer who could.
Yeah, and actually maybe this could be your new tagline. This is my marketer head like turning around. It's I think you have a thing for languages. You get it?
Maybe, but I'm
Yeah,
not
you
very
have a
good
thing
at it.
about languages, right? Because you said you're learning Japanese and Thai, but you know quite a number of languages, so to speak, like including coding
Programming.
language.
Actually,
Yeah,
I put it in my website. I say I'm learning Japanese and JavaScript. That's what I say.
yeah, yeah. That's thing, right? Like, you could say like you're a designer who loves languages,
Right.
and
Right. I
yeah,
know.
that's
I
actually
know a designer who can speak so many languages. Like
okay.
like
Cool.
she can speak like 9 languages.
Wow,
Maybe
that's
you should. Maybe you can interview her next. Maybe I'll
I would
intro you.
love to. I'm happy to connect with anyone who's
She's a real polyglot. So I understand what you're saying though, but I think I would not take that claim.
Ajmal, that's imposter syndrome speaking.
Yeah,
But I think you can take full credit for it because it's kind of like punny, right? Because it's like you
yeah, I
know
get it. Yeah,
coding and you know like Japanese or Thai. So that's
not Thai. Just Japanese.
just Japanese. Okay, yeah. So it's like kind of something you can speak about. But with that, thank you so much for spending time with us and sharing your experiences. Yeah, it was fun catching up and learning more about you. And thank you everyone in the audience for your questions. We're gonna release a podcast in a couple of weeks' time about Ajmal. But you can check out our recording of this video on Facebook, our Facebook page, or our YouTube channel. And please remember to subscribe if you're checking it out, or press the like button if you're on Facebook or Google. And we shall see you next month in another session of working in UX design. And thank you very much, everyone, for attending. So I am